So, of the two composers, Franz Liszt and Frédéric Chopin, whom do you prefer? I definitely have a preference, and I want to discuss the differences today, and I'm really interested to see what the comments are going to look like, because I bet there are strong opinions on both sides. So first of all, I need to clear away some of the obvious distinctions. We tend to think of Franz Liszt as being a much more vigorous, strong composer, and we're not talking about the later works where he goes off into almost impressionism. But saying that he's much more vigorous and stronger than Chopin is a little bit of a simplification. He has some very introspective pieces even in that earlier period. And then also, although Chopin can be more of a poet and favor more of this long, beautiful melodic line with more chromatic harmonies in the melodies, don't forget about the revolutionary etude. Don't forget about the heroic polonaise, right? So both of them had the ability to be extremely heroic, robust, and virtuosic, and they both did have the ability to tend more towards lyricism and poetry in their music. They both had that. But I do have to say, one of the things that turns me off sometimes with Liszt is that bombast in the earlier periods. I will never forget one week we had at New England Conservatory, which was the Liszt Festival week, with performances and competitions and master classes. And the whole, I think it was the third floor where most of the grand pianos were, was just for 1 week thundering with loud, it just came off as extremely loud, bombastic, virtuosic, and that really turned me off to Liszt for several years because of that. But some of that is because when you're a conservatory student, you're trying to show off your incredible technique, and you're going to pick the pieces that show people what you can do, that make people go, wow, that's an amazing effect, that's an amazing technique that you have there. But as I've gotten older, I have to say that of the two, I more often will turn to Chopin because of that lyricism, that poetry. Yes, there are some works that I can't listen to, such as the E minor prelude. It's just too maudlin for me, even if you play it faster the way Ben Zander recommends you do, which is revolutionary, by the way. But I do tend to go to that poetic side. I do tend to like that side that is like one person's soul speaking to another. I think that talks to me more. But there's another aspect to this, to why I prefer Chopin to Liszt. And that's because I think a lot of the time, Liszt was trying to be massively orchestral in his piano music. And I think he often was successful, but sometimes he wasn't. And that's what gets to me. The parts where it just simply comes off, at least in most performances, as just being super loud and sometimes obnoxious. Remember, Liszt was a great virtuoso, a very showy virtuoso, and some of what he did, like Paganini, was just written to show off his own abilities and to build up this mysticism. He was a rock star of his day. Whereas with Chopin, he just doesn't try to be orchestral. He has said, it's fine, I'm almost exclusively a composer for the piano, although I would direct you to his cello sonata, which is a masterful work, and I think the best of all his sonatas. Out of the 3 piano sonatas and the cello sonata, I think you'll prefer the cello sonata. But anyway, no, Chopin just tends to say, look, I'm a piano composer, take it or leave it, this is what I do. But he was a masterful composer. As I've said in another video, does it make him a second-rate composer because he mostly composed for piano? I don't think so. I think Chopin was a first-rate composer, and he wasn't trying to be orchestral. Now, Liszt did write works for orchestra. He did write those larger scale works. I tend to think, with very few exceptions, they are not as good as his piano works. And similarly, his piano works that try to sound orchestral, I tend to not like them either, because I listen and say, he wishes he had an orchestra here. But unlike the comparison I did in an earlier video, Brahms versus Wagner, I don't think that their music is really very different in terms of the style they're going for, in terms of the emotion. I just think it's different sides of it. I think Brahms and Wagner are quite different. And another thing about it is, I think it's safe to say that Liszt and Chopin greatly admired each other, even if they did different things. It's similar to the way Mendelssohn and Schumann were very different composers, but they both admired one another and they both respected what they were doing. So for me, I think the better composer, or at least my composer of choice, usually is Chopin. There are certain pieces by Liszt that I love. I will never stop loving them. And some of them are in that later period where he became more introspective, more pensive, more thoughtful about his place in the world. But even in his showy virtuoso period, there are a few pieces I like, certain specific pieces that I'll go to. But often if you offer me, right, coffee, tea, or milk, right, I'm going to pick the coffee. If you offer me Chopin or Liszt, I'm going to pick Chopin. There's just more of Chopin's music that I prefer. I think there's just more sincerity to a lot of it. Maybe that's the main thing. But I'm really curious to hear what you think. Do you have a strong preference either way, or do you think they're both equally good? And if you do have a preference, tell me why. What is it about the certain composers that makes you like them more than the other? Thank you so much for joining into this discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, you can become a member of the channel. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.